All right. Welcome everyone this evening to the presentation, The Feminist History of Wonder Woman and the Marvels. My name is Dr. Melissa Esmacher. I am an associate professor of history at El Paso Community College's Northwest campus. As a professor, I specialize in World War II era research, studying race and violence, but pop culture and feminism are longtime passionate subjects for me. I did actually a field in pop culture on my PhD exams, even though it wasn't the focus of my research. So I'm really excited to be sharing this topic today. I first did this presentation in the pre-COVID times, back right ahead of the release of Captain Marvel. So I'm really excited to get to revisit this topic and to incorporate some updates, including the character of Ms. Marvel, which had the Disney Plus series this summer. If you haven't checked it out, I will not go into too much detail and spoil it for you, but do know there may be some minor spoilers if you've not read all of the comics on these characters or seen all of the media. I try to keep it as spoiler-free as possible. All right, so some of the main sources that I am using in my talk tonight in terms of written sources, if you are not familiar with this book, The Secret History of Wonder Woman by Joe Lepore is a fantastic investigation not only on the history of Wonder Woman as a character, but basically a biography of her creators. And you'll notice the creators are a little complicated, which is why I say plural, even though she's usually attributed to one person. So we'll get into that a little bit in a second. Don't let the size of the book fool you. I mean, it's thick, but it reads really quickly. The other one that has a great examinations of not just Wonder Woman, but also Captain Marvel and Batgirl is the book Superwomen, Gender, Power, and Representation by Carolyn Coca. There's not as much out about Ms. Marvel in terms of academic books. I definitely relied there a little bit more on looking at current media, including the behind the scenes documentary on Disney Plus about the Ms. Marvel series for my notes on Ms. Marvel. So those are some of my sources. If you want to check out those books, feel free to email me and I'll send you more detailed information on how to get access to them. So the reason my presentation got started, why I started thinking about this, was after reading Joe Lepore's book and being a fan of the MCU, and also a longtime fan of X-Men from childhood and all the TV series of the 90s. I noticed, as my historian brain, that a lot of the female characters I liked in comics tended to be pegged their origins to phases of feminism. We have different waves of what we call feminism. And Wonder Woman as a character, even though she doesn't get introduced until World War II, which we'll talk about shortly, she really does sort of owe a great debt of gratitude to first wave feminism in the United States. So we call first wave feminism anything up until 1920, which is when the 19th Amendment gives women the right to vote. So first wave feminism is mostly about that push for women's suffrage, getting women the right to vote. And that's kind of the background for Wonder Woman, in part because her creator, the one that she's attributed to, William Moulton Marston, is very steeped in the women's suffrage movement in that background. He's a psychologist at a time when psychology was a very new field in terms of professionalization, and also an inventor. If you are familiar with the lie detector test, he invented that. Okay. Marston, though, as I mentioned, is not the sole creator of Wonder Woman. He's deeply influenced by his two female partners. Yes, you read that right. This man in the early 1900s is involved in a triad, a polyamorous relationship. Elizabeth Holloway Marston was his legal wife. And then Olive Byrne, who he met when she was in one of his undergraduate classes, will eventually become the third in their triad. And he's really inspired by these two very powerful women, very passionate suffragettes in his life, to create a female superhero to educate and inspire children to solve problems not with their fists or firepower, but with love. So Marston is still a big, even though his relationship is unconventional, he's still a big believer in traditional gender roles. So for him, he saw women as kind of the peacemakers, as more naturally submissive. And he didn't see that as a bad thing. He saw these as uniquely female qualities. And when he looked at comics at the time, which is really popular among kids in the 30s, he didn't see a lot of that. It was a lot of like bam, pow kind of deal. So Marston got this idea to write a female superhero. He worked with Max Gaines from the National Periodicals and All American Publications, what later becomes DC Comics, to write the first two Wonder Woman comics under a pen name together called Charles Moulton. To draw Wonder Woman, he recruits a cartoonist named H.G. Peter. You can see his original concept designs for Wonder Woman here on the slide. And Peter will actually be, despite his background as more of an editorial artist for newspapers, he will be the chief illustrator for Wonder Woman comics until his death in 1958. So Marston, when asked about why he created Wonder Woman, gave this quote: "Not even girls want to be girls, so long as our feminine archetype lacks strength, force, and power. Not wanting to be girls, they don't want to be tender, submissive, peace-loving, as good women are. Women's strong qualities have become despised because of their weakness. The obvious remedy is to create a feminine character with all the strength of Superman, plus all of the allure of a good and beautiful woman." Okay. So in creating the story for Wonder Woman, he really does, again, go back to the well of the suffragette movement. Partly because he and his partners were feminists, but also he has a very famous in-law. Olive Byrne is the niece of Margaret Sanger, who you may know as the founder of Planned Parenthood and an advocate for not only suffrage, but birth control. And Olive Byrne's mother was also a birth control advocate, Ethel Byrne. H.G. Peter also had a suffragette background. He had worked on pro-suffragette editorial cartoons until 1920, when women got the right to vote. And Peter's style, working in magazines like Judge Magazine, which you can see here, this editorial cartoon about house cleaning day, okay, voting out terrible politicians. But Peter also owes a great debt to another editorial cartoonist who never worked on Wonder Woman, but you can see the visual linkages here. This is Lou Rogers. Lou Rogers is actually a very fascinating person. She was a trailblazing pioneer for women in editorial comics in newspapers. She's an ardent feminist, and you can really clearly see the debt, stylistic debt that H.G. Peter has to Lou Rogers in these images here. One of the things you're going to see with Wonder Woman a lot in the first run, as we'll talk about more shortly, is this emphasis, this language on breaking chains, right, as this metaphor for becoming more free. So Wonder Woman as a character gets introduced first in 1941. She makes her debut in All-Star Comics #8. And then after the success of her appearance, she gets her own comic book series in 1942. Now, the history professors on this call will kind of note the significance of early 1942 being when she launches, because the United States gets involved in World War II in December of 1941. So Wonder Woman as a character is launched at the same time the United States is getting involved in World War II, and that will have a bearing on the stories that we see in Wonder Woman. So her origin story incorporates World War II. Originally, in this first iteration of Wonder Woman, she's introduced as the daughter of Queen Hippolyta, who is queen of an all-female tribe called Amazons, who live on the island of Themyscira. Queen Hippolyta wanted a daughter, so she sculpted her out of clay. And then the gods brought her to life and gave her powers. And Wonder Woman gets involved in our world when a pilot named Steve Trevor crash lands on Themyscira, and Wonder Woman earns the right to go and take him back to the man's world, where she gets drawn into World War II and the fight against the Nazis. Now, if you're not familiar with Amazons, this is not something that Marston invents. Okay, Amazons have a very long history in Greek mythology. Amazons in Greek mythology are this all-female warrior culture. And the Amazons are really important within the suffragette movement and first wave feminism because they're an example of what we call a matriarchal society, or a society in which women have power, as opposed to a patriarchal society, which we live in, where men have the majority of the economic, political, and social power. So for feminists, this is fascinating, this idea of this all-female society. In Greek lore, Amazons are written very fantastically. No such actual historical Amazons like they're written in Greek mythology exists. We know that they're based on tribes in a region in Central Asia called Scythia, where they didn't have all-female tribes, but women had a lot more rights, equality, and power, and fought alongside men. So the Greeks, in seeing this culture where women had more equality to men and were fighting in battle along men, were super impressed, and thus the legend of the Amazon was born. Okay. So for her creators, not only is making Wonder Woman, aka Diana Prince, her alter ego name, an Amazon a nod to a very important cultural touchstone for first wave feminism, but it's also a fun way to bring in other characters from Greek mythology, and also to contrast the peace of the matriarchal Themyscira with the chaos of World War II, right? The barbarity of war in a world run by men, basically. It was meant to be a contrast. So I mentioned the issue of chains. You'll see a lot of times in the early run of comics when Marston and Peter are still alive, Wonder Woman is oftentimes drawn as stereotypically a male superhero would be drawn. So you see here in the right-hand panel her carrying Steve Trevor, right, in a way that we usually see associated with damsels in distress, right, being carried by the male hero. But there's also an awful lot of chains. As I mentioned, Marston and Peter saw the breaking of chains as symbolizing freedom, right? Not only on getting more access to power, but also kind of casting off the shackles of conformity. And Wonder Woman being in chains so much kind of made the producers of the comic book nervous because they thought that, remember, the readers of comics at this time chiefly are children. So they looked at all this chains and they thought that Marston was kind of promoting bondage play. So there is this sense from his editors that they're like, you man, can you just cut back on the chains, right? Like, we don't want to promote BDSM to the children. And he kept insisting that wasn't why he put it in, right? But we do know from Marston's personal papers that there might have been some of that going on in his personal life, but that's a story for another day. All right, so as I mentioned, Wonder Woman launches at the same time as the United States involvement in World War II. It really helped to highlight the important role of women in the war. This is the first major war in which women are allowed to serve in the armed forces, although in only all-female auxiliary units. Like here on the left, you see women who are part of the WASPs. Their job in flying planes was just to deliver them. They don't have combat roles. About 400,000 American women served in the armed forces during World War II. And because World War II is what we call a total war, where normal life stopped and everything was focused on winning the war, women were equally important at home in roles like industrial workers, taking up jobs that had been left behind by men because of the draft, causing labor shortages. The same month that Wonder Woman's very first solo issue was published, January 1942, so remember, we're only a month into American involvement in the war, 2.8 million women were already working in war industries in the United States. Okay, so that gives you an example of the involvement of women in the war. Okay, so women are hugely crucial in building war materials and supplies, in supporting roles in the military, and Wonder Woman kind of really builds off that image of the super powerful, involved, patriotic women. Now, World War II ends, and the end of the war, basically people go, okay, women, thank you for your service in the war. Thank you for working, these demanding physical jobs like riveters and welders that we hadn't let you work before because those are man's jobs. That's great. But the men are home now. Let them have their jobs back. So a lot of women who had unprecedented freedom and access to all of these higher paying, better skilled jobs during World War II basically were among the first to be let go so that male veterans could take their place. And a lot of women basically get told that life needs to go back to normal, which means ideally women's roles are as wives and homemakers and mothers. And there were certainly some women who wanted to do this, right? They were only working as long as the war went on, right? But for other women who would have liked to have the option to continue the way World War II was, they didn't really have too much of a choice. So society kind of retreated into a more sort of socially conservative area. Okay, so we have this emphasis on very traditional gender roles. And at the same time, in 1947, Marston, the creator of Wonder Woman, dies of cancer. And his insistence on the feminism of Wonder Woman and her depiction dies with him. Even though H.G. Peter, as I mentioned, the chief illustrator, lives another decade and continues to work on Wonder Woman, the writers from Wonder Woman start to push the storyline in a more conservative direction. For example, many stories in the Wonder Woman comics start to give more power to Steve Trevor, the male love interest of Wonder Woman, and they start depicting Wonder Woman as wanting to get married. In fact, in the 1950s, her comic books started DC Comics started adding in um, love and marriage and romance supplements, like little booklets that you could pull out that focused on kind of romance. And that persisted for 2 decades, by the way. Not until the 1970s did they phase those out. They also changed her origin story in the 1950s. They shifted her origin story to her being the daughter of Queen Hippolyta of the Amazon and a shipwrecked mortal man. Okay, so as before, she's created entirely by a woman. Now she's a little bit more conventionally born. And you can see the depictions, right, in the comics. This is very strikingly visually different, right, from the images from the first run of Wonder Woman. And then even though they're not the prime focus of this presentation, I did want to give a shout out to Batwoman and Batgirl, who were introduced in the 1950s, primarily because of the publication of a book in 1954. If you're a comics history fan, you probably know what I'm talking about. This is the book called Seduction of the Innocent by Frederick Wertham. In which he basically talked about how comics are deeply corrupting American youth by promoting horrible values, including homosexuality. And in that book, he specifically kind of writes about a homoerotic vibe between Batman and Robin. And so that's one of the reasons that DC Comics introduced Batwoman and Batgirl as love interests for Batman and Robin to kind of address the criticism leveled by Seduction of the Innocent, that Batman and Robin were more than just friends. So the second wave of feminism The first wave focused on women getting the right to vote. The second wave of feminism really starts in the early 1960s. We kind of, in the United States, pin the second wave of feminism to the publication in 1963 of a book called The Feminine Mystique by Betty Friedan. The Feminine Mystique talks about what life was like for women in the 1950s and being told that the only acceptable role for them in society was to be wives and mothers, regardless of their personality, regardless of their talent or their desires. And Friedan wrote that this was deeply unsatisfying for women. And part of the reason that why we have such a big gap between first wave feminism, which ends in 1920, and second wave feminism, which begins in the 1960s, was nobody could quite agree on what the next step should be after women get the right to vote. What other things should we focus on in the feminist movement? So for women in the 1960s, they really focused on attaining social, economic, and political equality. So during the 1960s, we see women's groups like NOW, the National Organization of Women, which Betty Friedan will actually be a president of, form, and women start to push for equal access to education, which results in Title IX in 1972, which is having its 50th anniversary this year. We are very familiar at the college, right, with Title IX, because that affects access to higher education. Women also push for less discrimination in employment. We see this in Title VII of the Civil Rights Act in 1964. And they also push for an amendment to the Constitution called the Equal Rights Amendment, which would put in the Constitution that women and men were equal. That push to pass what we call the ERA, the Equal Rights Amendment, did eventually fail when it failed to get enough states to ratify the constitutional amendment by the timeline, the end time they put of 1982. Okay. So women are pushing for more political solutions to address issues of inequality and unequal access. And in the spirit of these times of women advocating more for their equality in society, Marvel Comics decides that they want to make a character to discuss this, right? To ride this wave of feminist momentum. And so in 1968, Marvel introduces a character named Carol Danvers. Carol Danvers did not originally get conceived of as a hero. She started out as a love interest for Captain Marvel, who was a Kree superhero on Earth. Carol Danvers as a character was depicted as the head of security at a military base. So she was depicted very much as a second wave feminist, a very confident career woman working in a man's world. Now, she gets promoted to her own superhero in 1977. And she gets the name Ms. Marvel. Her origin story of her as Ms. Marvel is that she gets exposed to radiation during a battle between Captain Marvel and the villainous Yon-Rogg. And that ends up giving her her powers. Marvel not only wanted to capitalize on the popularity of feminism by the 1970s, but they also wanted to protect some trademarks. So hence the name. One of the original writers on the Ms. Marvel series, Jerry Conway, stated Ms. Marvel, because of her name, if nothing else, is influenced to a great extent by the move towards women's liberation. She is not a Marvel girl. She's a woman. She is not a Miss or a Mrs. She is a Ms. her own person. So there's a reason that she's Ms. Marvel MS, right? This was the alternative that some women started to adopt during the 1960s because they objected to their title basically being determined by whether they were single or married with Miss or Mrs. Now, Jerry Conway writes the Ms. Marvel run originally with a very heavy hand. He really beats you over the head that rah second wave feminism. Okay. He really focuses a lot of her stories on womanhood and femininity in a way that female readers thought kind of came off as sexist and pandering and off-putting. And the reason we know that is because back during this time period in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, comic books had sections where they printed letters from readers that readers had sent in as fan mail. And so there's a lot of these letters from female readers of Ms. Marvel being printed in these issues going like, hey man, like you're super heavy-handed. Have you met a woman? We're not all obsessed with, you know, man-hating or makeup, right? And what's interesting about Ms. Marvel, the other thing too, is basically the way they explain her powers is that she herself, Carol Danvers, does not have the powers, but that she has had a Kree warrior consciousness kind of melded to her human form. So it's kind of like having two individuals trapped in the same body. And they really kind of frame it as Carol is more stereotypically feminine, and then the kind of Kree warrior side is more sort of masculine. So the writers of the original run kind of have her identities keep fighting against each other and clashing. New writers, Chris Claremont and a new editor, Archie Goodwin, are brought in issue number 8 to revamp the character and to address some of the criticisms from their female audience. And they start to take that depiction of two separate identities, and instead of having them fight each other, they start having them learn from each other and work together more. Claremont also introduced added backstory for Carol Danvers by having it that she was constantly trying to be taken seriously to compete in a very male-dominated world of the military background that she's from. And that she achieved a lot of what she did through hard work and determination. And this initial run of Ms. Marvel runs for about 2 years and ends in 1979. The late 70s were a pretty good time to be a female comic book fan. There were the introduction of new female characters within Marvel, such as my favorite X-Men, Storm, was introduced in 1975. And then Wonder Woman got her own television series. Linda Carter portrayed Wonder Woman from 1975 to 1979. The first season was basically very much based on her original origin story in World War II, and then subsequent seasons, because it was too expensive to film period details, they brought her into the then present. So Carter, if you go back and watch it, Carter's performance is really good, and she was hailed for having a very nuanced performance of Wonder Woman. However, if you take a look at her costume, it doesn't look super secure. Let's just say it that way. So because of her costume and her assets as they are, the Wonder Woman TV show actually kind of got lumped together with other shows that kind of emphasized more sort of like casual attitudes about sex, what we call like jiggle TV from the 1970s, and not really taken seriously, okay, as a show. But one of the other interesting things to come out of the 70s is the creation of a sister for Wonder Woman, Nubia. So Nubia was created in the DC Comics in 1973. She was introduced as Wonder Woman's long-lost twin sister in Wonder Woman issue 204. And technically, Nubia is actually the first female Black superhero in DC Comics. You can kind of see the introduction of Nubia as also a recognition of the rising Black civil rights movement. So you could again see that comics are trying to respond to the changes in American society. The origin story that Nubia was given was that she and Diana were both created from clay. Nubia was just a different color, hence her skin color being different. And that Nubia was kidnapped by Ares, the god of war, okay, as a baby, and raised in a place called Floating Island, which was basically a mirror image of Themyscira, so all men instead of all women. And that she had been under the mind control of the war god Ares. She encountered Diana in battle and defeated her with a magic sword, but ended up breaking free from her mind control when ordered to attack the Amazons. And thus she is reunited. DC doesn't seem to know what to do with the character of Nubia. Since she was introduced in 1973, they've kind of used her here and there. DC's Crisis on Infinite Earths in 1985 kind of reboots their comic universe and erases her. A rebooted Nubia, which you see here depicted with the giant sword in the image, that's the second from right, is introduced in 1999 with a new backstory that just says she's another Amazon warrior that predated Diana, not related to her. And she was presumed lost when she was tasked with guarding the entrance to Hades or Hell. And then she apparently hooks up with Ahura Mazda, which is kind of interesting because Ahura Mazda is a deity associated with Zoroastrianism, not Greek religion. But again, story for another day. And then Nubia was rebooted as recently as last year in a new graphic novel titled Nubia Real One, helmed by two Black female writers, L.L. McKinney as the writer and Robin Smith as the artist. And this imagines Nubia as an American teenager, and really kind of talks about how this Black female teenager with superpowers deals with a world where our American society still tends to see Black people and Black women as threats, right? How can she come across as heroic fighting all of these stereotypes against her? Now, when we get to the 1980s, there is a backlash against second wave feminism as American politics becomes more conservative. And we really see that backlash become apparent by what happens to Carol Danvers' character. So I'm going to give y'all a quick content warning. If you are really sensitive to discussions of sexual assault, you might want to mute me for another 5 minutes and then come back on. So in Avengers 200, they include a storyline where Carol Danvers is assaulted and impregnated by a character named Marcus. And this pregnancy is not a normal pregnancy. Like, she gets pregnant and then it proceeds very quickly, like it's in fast forward mode. Okay? And what's really weird about this storyline is it was not in the original draft of the issue. This storyline was basically added at the insistence of then editor-in-chief Jim Shooter. And in the storyline, all of the Avengers are more concerned about Carol's baby than Carol herself, even as she is trying to process this experience of being assaulted and being pregnant and going through this fast forward pregnancy. Even when she expresses anger and confusion, nobody really listens to her or helps her. She ends up having a baby who, because we're in comics, is also her assaulter. So it's like her son/assaulter. It's really weird. And again, like, he grows super fast. And then the comic basically makes her fall in love with her son/assaulter and leaving the Avengers to pursue a relationship with him. So all kinds of messed up here. So many levels of being messed up. And feminists were horrified by this turn for this character, which they had supported. Carol Strickland wrote an essay called The Rape of Ms. Marvel to protest this storyline and how it handled Carol Danvers' assault. And they weren't the only ones horrified. A lot of the comics writers, particularly Chris Claremont, who had come on and the rest to finish off the rest of the initial run of Ms. Marvel, was horrified by this. And he actually wrote Carol Danvers into the Uncanny X-Men series in 1981 as a way to kind of take back control of the character and to rehabilitate her and to make it so that a storyline like that couldn't happen again. And so in the issue where he reincorporates her, he has her go into battle against Rogue, who this time is a villain, and Rogue ends up absorbing her powers and her memories. So Carol Danvers, poor Carol Danvers, ends up spending most of the 80s and the 90s kind of bouncing around between having powers, losing powers, gaining new powers, undergoing a couple of name changes, including Binary, and then by the 1990s, Warbird, which also depicts her as turning to alcoholism in an effort to cope with all of the trauma she's endured. And yeah, Carol Danvers goes through the ringer in the 80s and 90s. Now, also in the 80s and 90s, one of the other changes that we see is the way that comics are sold. So Wonder Woman briefly has a feminist renaissance under George Perez, who took over for drawing Wonder Woman in 1985. But for the most part, the comics of the 80s and the 90s are not so feminist. Part of this is because comic books used to be sold at like grocery stores and corner shops, so very easy to access. Again, remember the primary market was children. However, once we get to the 80s and 90s, more people are either getting their comics delivered directly to them in the mail, or they're going to specialty comic book stores to get them, which means the market now goes from children, in line at the grocery store with their parents to now more older heterosexual white men. And so the comics that are drawn in the 80s and 90s tried to kind of cater to this audience by emphasizing what we call the bad girl style of art. Okay. The bad girl style of art gets its name from the way women are drawn to kind of overly emphasize their assets to appeal to a straight male audience. And to show women in very little clothing and very physically impossible poses. So you can definitely see this in the middle one with Wonder Woman. We call that the broke back pose because you literally cannot contort your body in that way without breaking your back. Okay. You can also see in the Ms. Marvel panel on the right, that artist clearly is not a woman and does not know how spandex works on boobs. Just saying. So a lot of this art, again, is not meant to be realistic. It's drawn to titillate. It's drawn to excite straight men. And frequently during this time period, Wonder Woman in particular is kind of like oversexed in her depictions. Wonder Woman tends to have phases where she's depicted as more feminist and also more queer, and then more sort of conservatively. So it's kind of interesting to look at Wonder Woman's character. You can kind of tell what rough decade you're dealing with by how she's portrayed. So a lot of this starts to change in 2000 because we have a shift in how comics are marketed with the rise of the internet. We do have a new generation of more feminist-friendly writers, including Phil Jimenez, Greg Rucka, Gail Simone, who come on to write for Wonder Woman. So in the comics, Wonder Woman has this kind of feminist renaissance, even though her depiction in animated TV series tends to still be more one-note and violent. Ms. Marvel, also similar to Wonder Woman, has a kind of feminist renaissance in the comics runs, but on her depiction on animated television is still kind of rough. The popularity of the internet, and particularly internet message boards, allows a lot more quick feedback and interaction between writers and fans. And so this kind of discussion, this dialogue prompted by the internet does impact the kinds of stories that are pitched and approved now by the comics books industry. So one of these is the introduction now of Carol Danvers by her current title, Captain Marvel. In 2012, Carol Danvers gets this name change and becomes Captain Marvel in a new series written by Kelly Sue DeConnick. This series of Captain Marvel is explicitly written to capitalize on what we call third wave feminism. So third wave feminism really kind of gets its start in the 80s and the 90s to take feminism to the next level and specifically focuses on the issue of intersectionality. In other words, feminism should include everyone, regardless of race, social class, right? We should be more inclusive, like ability. And so Carol Danvers, in ditching the Ms. Marvel title, Marvel editor Steve Wacker explained why they decided to change her name. He said, changing the name was not a change we took lightly. We debated it internally at Marvel for years. With all due respect to the Ms. Marvel name, it's a different era. To me, it made sense, given her military background and her importance for Carol to feel part of something bigger, to call her Captain Marvel. We want the comic and the character to be inspired by that same consuming need to fly higher and faster than those who came before. So the Captain Marvel comic run definitely emphasizes female power, intersectional relationships. It has a nod to Monica Rambeau, who was actually the very first character to go under the moniker of Captain Marvel back in the 1980s and 90s. She basically goes under the name of Photon. It'll be interesting to see whether the MCU embraces that name as well. And Monica's abilities as Captain Marvel, including the ability to change her body into energy. Okay. And we see in the MCU a adult version of Monica Rambeau getting her powers in the series WandaVision after she was initially introduced in the Captain Marvel movie as a little girl. So it seems like she's going to be pretty prominent in the next Marvel movie. Now, another thing that the internet made possible was digital sales of comics, allowing people to download their comics, have digital delivery. This really becomes popular in 2010, and this opens the comics industry to reaching audiences that never really had as much access to comics before. And so it encourages the comics industry to experiment with different characters and different stories to try to appeal to an expanded market. And this is the background in which the character of Ms. Marvel is introduced. Yes, you read that right. We're going back to Ms. Marvel, but she's no longer Captain Danvers, or excuse me, Carol Danvers. This Ms. Marvel is named Kamala Khan. She was introduced in a comic series written by G. Willow Wilson in 2014, after being initially introduced as a character in the Captain Marvel series. And Kamala Khan is depicted as a Muslim American teenage girl in New Jersey who is obsessed with the Avengers, and in particular, a huge fan of Carol Danvers, or Captain Marvel. And that when Kamala Khan gains her superpowers, which is slightly different in the show versus the comics, that she models herself and her duty to help people after Carol Danvers. And in the comics, she chooses her name, Ms. Marvel, as a way to honor Carol Danvers, who is Captain Marvel. The TV show on Disney Plus gives a slightly different origin to her name, with her dad kind of helping her come up with it. In 2018, so only a couple years after her comic was introduced, she had already sold 500,000 trade paperbacks of the original introduction of Ms. Marvel. And her title is consistently one of the best-selling on Marvel's digital platforms. So you can see why, even though she was only introduced 8 years ago in the Marvel Comics universe, why she was upgraded so quickly and given her own Disney Plus series, because her character is exceedingly popular, including in international markets. And for the most part, when you watch the Disney Plus series about Ms. Marvel, they stay fairly true to the comics, making some small tweaks to her origin story by giving her a bangle that kind of channels her powers that seems to be connected to the Kree, which Captain Marvel also has connections to. And they also change her story to include the history of partition, which was the real life event in which Britain split India into India for Hindus, and then Pakistan and Bangladesh for Muslims. And so the TV show really kind of, I think, is one of the very first kind of major global pop culture stories to really use partition as a storyline element in a background, which is really important because it is a huge event in the history of colonialism in India. And just like the comic book series, Ms. Marvel as a TV series is full of intersectional feminism. So I mentioned Ms. Marvel on film. Obviously, when we're talking about Wonder Woman and Captain Marvel, they both become the first women, respectively, in DC and the MCU to have their own standalone films in 2017 and 2019. Wonder Woman already had her sequel, the not universally beloved Wonder Woman 84, which took her forward in time. Um, the Captain Marvel sequel called The Marvels, which will also include Ms. Marvel, Kamala Khan, as well as Monica Rambeau, will be coming next year. And then we also had a small cameo in the alternate universe version of Maria Rambeau. So in the Captain Marvel movie that was introduced in 2019, Maria Rambeau, Monica's mother, was Carol Danvers' best friend. So in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, somewhere in an alternate universe, Maria gets the powers, not Carol, and so she becomes Captain Marvel. So we get a brief glimpse of that. Now, in terms of on TV, as I mentioned, Monica Rambeau is further explored as a character and gains her superpowers during WandaVision, which aired in 2020, and then, 2021, I think. And then Ms. Marvel, as I mentioned, if you haven't seen it yet, it's super fantastic. That just came out this summer, and it feels like a comic book when you watch it. It's very visually like a graphic novel. Now, I did want to give a quick shout out before I head to Q&A to two characters who have not made it to headline their own films yet. One because of issues with mergers of networks, and the other because she's new. So Batgirl made the headlines a couple of years ago. It feels like years ago, man. A couple of weeks ago, earlier in August 2022, when Warner Brothers announced that they were canceling the film and they would not release it, despite the fact that it was complete and in post-production. This is sad because this would have been the first major solo outing for Batgirl, number one. Number two, it would have starred Leslie Grace, who's an Afro-Latina, which is great for representation. And it was also directed by Adil El-Arbi and Bilal Fallah, who actually directed both the first and the last episodes of the Ms. Marvel series, in which they did fantastic work. So lots of people justifiably mad about not getting to see Batgirl, and also because the discussion of why they canned it and why Warner Brothers and Discovery were merging unearthed a lot of sexist attitudes about the kinds of things that men versus women consume in popular culture. And then Yara Flor, I wanted to mention very briefly. She's a very new character, also known as Wonder Girl. She was introduced in January 2021 in DC Comics as the daughter of an Amazon and a Brazilian river god. So she has lots of cool powers. Again, Latina, Wonder Girl, super exciting for representation. Looking forward to seeing if Warner manages to dig themselves out of their hole of the cancellation of Batgirl and other projects to have a functional DC cinematic universe. But that's the end of my presentation. So I wanted to go ahead and leave room for questions. So if you have a question, you can either type it out in the chat or you can use the emoji reactions to use the raise hand icon. And I will post the sign-in link in the chat. One more time. Any questions? So I see that Professor Dahlgren said in the chat that commented that during World War II, the same thing happened to deaf men as happened to women, that they got to work during the war and then were told to give up their jobs afterwards. That's super sad and unsurprising. But yeah, that's awful. I didn't know about that. All right. So Professor Nelson, you had a question. You are muted, Professor Nelson.
Sorry, it's been a long day. Apologies. Regarding the Batwoman cancellation, I believe I heard or read somewhere that they canceled that not midway through production, and they had something like $70 million invested in it.
90 million dollars.
Well, what's $20 million amongst friends? Some of the corporate decisions here are very perplexing. Very perplexing.
Especially because like they said, oh well, it tested poorly with audiences. It's like, well, but you still invested $90 million. Even if it tests poorly, you release it and you get some of that back rather than sitting on it. Number one. Number two, the Flash movie with Ezra Miller and all the legal problems that they've been having, and the behavioral issues, right? People are like, why are you still releasing that, but not Batgirl? And the answer seems to be tax write-offs, that they can get a pretty good tax write-off if they sit on this and don't release it.
And the other thing is, if you forbid something, the talk that's been up on the late night talk shows is that now that it's been canned and pulled off the market, all the commentators on the late night talk shows are saying, now I really want to see it. Why is it so bad? There was one show, oh my Lord, in the 70s, Attack of the Killer Tomatoes, which I think was the inspiration for the Rotten Tomatoes movie rating system.
Mm-hmm.
So there's probably a lot of marketing, maneuvering, and leveraging going on behind this that probably goes well beyond what our academic interest is, in advocacy for civil rights.
Yeah. Well, good questions and observations. So I'm looking at the chat. Yeah, the Wonder Girl run ending early, and with it, the chances of a film or TV show. Like, it sucks to be a DC Comics fan because you see the MCU like doing well, branching into all of these different medium now, including fantastic TV shows. And DC just can't seem to figure out the formula, even though they got some great characters. Like if I have to pick between DC and Marvel, I would edge towards Marvel because I always have a soft spot for the X-Men, which is kind of my first superhero like thing I jumped on in childhood. But I do have a lot of love for DC characters and the mythos, and it sucks to see them repeatedly canning really interesting ideas. Like I think it was Ava DuVernay was supposed to direct a New Gods movie about DC, and I was like, dang it, that would have been so cool. Josh asked what is my main theory on the season 5/6 main villain for the MCU. I mean, it's Kane the Conqueror, but I also feel like we're getting to what is it, Battle World, right? Where there are multiple realities kind of duking it out against each other for survival, if they go by the comics, which the MCU doesn't always. Other questions? All right, thank you guys so much for joining me. I will be posting this onto YouTube, and I will stay on for a few more minutes if you have questions, but I'll end the recording now. And thank you so much for joining me tonight.